Firstly, today, I would like to introduce today's speakers. I'm Matt Hilden. I'm the Portfolio Director for all of ThoughtWorks UK's retail and travel clients. I will be your moderator today. Second, we have Ruja Wang joining us, who is a lead business consultant specializing in retail and is based out of our ThoughtWorks China offices. Ruja will be leading the core part of the webinar today and giving us her personal and professional insight into life under lockdown in China. Next up, we have Kevin Flynn. Kevin's a ThoughtWorks UK retail strategist and will be part of our panel discussion later in the call. He's going to be sharing his thoughts on the actionable strategy we should be looking to put in place right now and for the near future. And lastly, I'm delighted to welcome Adam Knight to the call today. Adam is the co-founder of Tong Digital, which is the UK's first and leading Chinese social commerce agency. Adam will be sharing insights into current customer sentiment in China later in our panel discussion. Okay, so a whirlwind run through the agenda today. Rouge is going to take us on this journey of innovations emerging from the lockdown conditions in China. The panel discussion will share customer insights and retail strategy conversations. And finally, we'll conclude by answering some of the questions I hope you can all share via the Q&A button below. Okay, so apologies for those of you who know ThoughtWorks well, but I'm conscious there are many new faces on the call today, so just a brief introduction to who we are and what services we provide. ThoughtWorks is a global software consultancy with over 7,000 people worldwide, and ever growing that number with new countries, new ThoughtWorkers, and new cities popping up week on week. I deliberately use the term software consultancy as we do not sell our own products. Our goal is always to help our clients develop the best solutions to solve their biggest problems. Okay, we talk about our promises when working with you, our promises to our clients. Firstly, we will always aim to make you stronger when we leave than you were when you invited us in to work with you. Our processes and techniques are best in class and we never keep them secret. And that's evident by the amount of books that we share with our intelligence shared for you to pick up and use yourselves. Upskilling your colleagues with new tools to help them do their job better will strengthen your core and allow you to grow. Next, scaling with flexibility. That refers to the ability for ThoughtWorks to help you support you move at both speed and with scale. Establishing evolutionary architecture alongside microservices brings that flexibility to your organization. But when you combine this with drawing from ThoughtWorks' talent pool across strategy, design, portfolio management, as well as our core dev capability, and ThoughtWorks gives you the skills to have the confidence to achieve your growth targets. And lastly, innovate for growth. Surely that's one of the core reasons we're all here today. We all want to hear about the innovation. We all want to hear how we can grow. Well, ThoughtWorks has the innovation and ideation frameworks to help you find your hidden opportunities, to help you pivot to become a modern digital business, delivering the true products and services that your customers need. Second, we have our guiding principles. We will never, I certainly, and our colleagues will never apologize for encouraging you to think big. Our discovery and inception processes always unearth that plethora of opportunity for our clients and helping you to have the confidence and clarity to go after the transformational change. That's key to who we are. If you attach to that this obsession for delivering value, we are never ever going to be that partner that takes your idea, disappears for 12 to 18 months, comes back with that ta-da moment of here's the software solution you were looking for. When has that ever worked? Instead, our approach is always in hand-to-hand, build, test, learn, repetition, ensuring you're finding and delivering the right value for you and your customers, and quickly. And that quickly word's important because last and certainly not least importantly, is about speed, moving fast. How many of you have heard or have described your own organization as being lean or having adopted agile? There's enormous variance in the true understanding of these words. And sadly, the current conditions we're facing right now are highlighting the difference between the organizations who have one product team or a tech department who describe themselves as agile and a true actual organization that is fully agile. Please keep this in mind today as we hear our speakers talk. An organization must strive for agility. It enables you to flex, pivot, rethink your business model, even when an invisible virus comes along and rips up your entire 2020 strategic plan. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Ruja, who is going to share with us some stories of companies who have dared to innovate and refused to be hamstrung by lockdown conditions. Welcome to the call, Ruja.
Cool, thanks Matt. Hi everyone, I'm very excited to be online today to share with you some stories from China where I am based right now. So this is a picture of what was one of the busiest shopping areas in Beijing. It was completely empty when China went into mass quarantine. So COVID-19 might seem like a bit of a retail apocalypse, but underneath the gloom and doom, times of crisis have been catalysts for retailers to redefine their business. So just a quick story, let's go back to SARS in 2003. At the time, e-commerce was just starting to emerge in China. And at the time, Alibaba was primarily a B2B platform, so it was connecting US buyers with Chinese suppliers. And with offline business movement restricted, a lot of people turned to Alibaba online to source their products. And that's when the platform really took off. So that experience led Jack Ma to start Alibaba's very successful C2C platform, Taobao, in 2003 as well. A similar story in 2003, Jingdong at the time was a small chain of offline electronic stores. And during SARS, all offline sales dried up. And so the founder devoted all his resources to growing his online business. And today, Alibaba and Jingdong are two of the biggest retailers in the world. So these are just examples of innovations in previous times of crisis. Today, what I'll be doing is sharing some examples of innovation in China today, propelled by COVID-19, and some thought starters for you and your business. So if we move on to the next slide. So while customers are at home, it is important that retailers are staying connected with them and keeping the brand top of mind. Here is an example from Nike and Lululemon. During COVID-19, they're holding live stream workout sessions daily on their own apps or on social channels, such as Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. And it doesn't require a lot of digital sophistication, so a lot of these third-party channels are already set up. The key success factors in doing this, firstly, includes generating that content that really serves the customer and their needs to relieve boredom, to stay healthy and to stay positive, rather than content that emphasizes the transactions or slick branding. So to make it really authentic rather than a polished experience, Nike and Lululemon, they called on their local coaches to run the sessions from their home, so you can see from the picture, or from the local store, so the Lululemon picture on the right. Secondly, it's really important that these businesses have the capabilities to capture the data on these customers so they can convert them to their own channels and communicate and retarget them when the economy restarts. This is becoming a more popular concept in China. We call it private traffic. So we use third-party channels to acquire the customers, to get them to look at our live stream in the first place, but we need to move them onto our own channels to reduce the reliance on these third-party paid channels. So our question to you is, what are you doing to stay engaged with your customers during COVID-19? How are you capturing these leads and enriching your customer database? So personally, I've been watching a lot of live stream over the last few months, primarily for entertainment, but these have led to lots of online purchases as well. So live stream e-commerce or shoppertainment is taking off. In 2019, live stream sales actually accounted for 9% of e-commerce sales in China. And we believe this will increase significantly in 2020. And all categories, from luxury brands to high street brands, they're using this new format to attract customers or to launch and to sell their new products. On the left, we can see here, Louis Vuitton was one of the first in the luxury industry who adopted live stream e-commerce in China. So just last month, Louis Vuitton, they partnered with Little Red Book. It's an inspiration and e-commerce platform in China to live stream the launch of their new summer collection. And then for customers who wanted to buy, they redirected them to their own private domain, so to the Louis Vuitton e-commerce site to purchase. We've been helping luxury brands like these to set up their capabilities for their sales associates as well to continue to do e-commerce while customers can't come into the store. So they can maintain that one-on-one relationship with customers and continue to sell to them over the channels that they're used to. So over social channels like WeChat, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. But setting up that ability for the sales associate to take that secure payment online, to organize a luxury white glove delivery service, and make sure, most importantly, that commissions are still attributed to these sales associates. However, there are brands that also have less digital capability. So for these brands, shopping malls in China are really trying to play a part to help these tenants. So the picture on the right, you can see, is actually from the social media account for a mall in Beijing. And what they're doing is they're moving around to a different store each day and hosting a live stream from the store. If the store doesn't actually have an e-commerce capability to allow the customer to transact, they're improvising because they don't have much time. So within a couple of days, they can set up, just a quick social media account and use the store WeChat account for a transaction. These conversion rates and engagement in this sort of live stream or one-on-one social commerce is much higher than other forms of e-commerce. We believe this is really because people, while they're physically distanced, they still really want that social connection. So the interaction with the salespeople who can answer their customer questions live, it feels really authentic. You're shopping with other customers as well, so there's this feeling of hype and scarcity. So for you, how can you empower your sales associate to continue to sell online? How using your empty spaces, if your malls are still open, how can you use these to actually continue to sell to your customers? And then how can you improvise quickly to turn that inspiration to purchase if you didn't have an existing e-commerce site set up? So the next example is actually buying online isn't just for clothes or makeup, accessories. Have you ever thought about purchasing your car online without ever seeing it or touching it? Or something even bigger, what about your new home? These are traditionally industries that really rely heavily on an offline experience. But COVID-19 has forced businesses in China to innovate in this area. So what I've got here is an example from Beike. Beike is an online real estate platform that has invested heavily in virtual reality technology. So during COVID-19, Beike actually announced a new sales department. They call it the VR sales department. And they released these off-the-plan apartments for purchase online with a VR experience. For this set of apartments, in just 8 minutes, they were able to get deposits for 1,000 properties. And the ultimate conversion rate was around 70%. So you might be thinking virtual reality in real estate, it's not really that new. A lot of real estate platforms already have this 360-degree viewing and the walkthroughs. But what Beike has done is actually made that spatial profiling technology the core of the new business model. So think about secondhand home sales. One of the biggest pain points here is you're trying to imagine what the home could look like with your furniture or with new renovation. Beike, with their spatial profiling technology, they can go into the house in 20 minutes, understand each inch of the home, where the TV is, where the couch is, and replace all of the furniture and the lighting. And so you can look at it in virtual reality and partner with a renovation company to get it to look like the way that you want to. And that becomes a new revenue stream for this online real estate platform. So how are you investing in technology that will become your core competitive advantage? And if you're optimizing your portfolio during this crisis, how can you make sure that you don't cut the muscle of the organization when we're optimizing the portfolio? If we move on to the next page. COVID-19 is also disrupting supply chain significantly. This is causing a problem for all industries, but in particular for fresh produce, which can't be stored easily. So what Alibaba in China did during COVID-19 is they set up a special campaign on the platform to help farmers to sell their overstocked goods with expedited delivery to the customer. So most of the items are sold in bulk of 5 to 10 kilos for logistics reasons. And they were able to sell 200 tons of produce just in the afternoon of the day that this new channel was set up. This is a really good opportunity for local producers or typically using wholesale model to try a direct to customer business model. So probably using a social platform, a third-party channel or partnership to try to target some local customers and a good way to move overstocked produce. And it could be a new sales channel in the future. At the same time, if you do actually own a channel to customers, or if you have capabilities in delivery, logistics, how can you help these farmers to move their produce at this time? And businesses are thinking really creatively to solve these last mile problems. I've already seen some examples from overseas as well, where taxis, ride sharing companies have been repurposed for grocery delivery. Moving on to the next slide. This is also an opportunity to try new business models. So businesses in China are really thinking about what are their core competencies and how can they pivot their business models at this time? And why this is a great opportunity today to try a new business model is because customers really have a high tolerance for businesses trying new things. And if it fails, it disappears, but it doesn't get that much criticism. So one example here is of a gas station, Sinopec. Gas stations, they have really high density, which make it a great optimal convenience store. Sinopec at this time, they trialed a new contactless grocery shopping innovation. So the gas station has an app. When you enter the app, you can look and find a pre-packed mixed box of fresh produce, and it's sourced from all the local farmers as well who have overstock produce. So the gas station can acquire it for really cheap. Then they put in the mixed box of a set weight and just sell it for a set price. And then once the customers pay on the app, the petrol station employees deliver these straight to the boot of the car. So completely contactless purchase experience. And we can think about whether this could be an enduring source of revenue for gas stations after the epidemic is over as well. If we move on to the next page. So we're starting to see retail activity pick up again in China. I had a look at the latest data. So China's Chain Store and Franchise Association, I think they say around 85–90% of department stores and shopping centers are back open now in China. But traffic is still around 35–40% of previous levels. During this time, the market is talking about a new persona. We call it the revenge shopper, and they're out to satisfy that pent-up demand. For the revenge shopper, some brands are holding these very special events to attract them back to the store. So Hermes is one of these examples. On the left, we can see a news headline. So they celebrated their reopening in Guangzhou by inviting these VIP customers to the store, and they shipped a bunch of rare Birkins to the store, rare products, and generated the highest turnover on a single day for the boutique. And on the right, we can see images of, I've just taken some screenshots from the Little Red Book of customers who were just sharing that shopping experience. They're very excited to get back in. So how are you preparing to welcome your customer back to the store? What I've shown today are examples of retailers who are experimenting with these new forms of retail. And they're not just waiting for COVID-19 to end. The challenge we really put to you is to do the same. How can you continue to invest in that digital muscle? Those people who were able to innovate in that period of crisis, they didn't just have the creativity and capability to execute fast. They had actually spent years investing in those omni-channel capabilities, in technology, in supply chains, ecosystem partnerships. And despite most stores opening again in China, it will take a bit of a time for activity to resume to normal levels. So these capabilities will become what we believe an enduring source of competitive advantage. So that was a quick overview of some of the stories from China and some food for thought. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we can continue to have a chat about these.
The questions are surely coming in. They're already coming in, Ruja, so you will be busy at the end of the call.
Sure.
Well, thank you. That was incredible to hear those stories showcasing true business model innovation. When your customers can't engage with you in the traditional manner, you have two options. You're either going to sit this out, and who knows how long this will be, or what the future even looks like. Or you pivot and you find a model, you find a way to thrive in this adversity. I challenge you all to think about, can you do this? Can you think outside of your traditional revenue channels and your traditional business models? Can you think big? I know we have fashion retailers on the call today. Shoppertainment would be such a simple solution to drive more sales. In some cases, it simply is Facebook Live, a mobile phone, and being able to and talk to your customers, other to more sophisticated models where you're able to swipe up, link through to e-commerce, etc. We also have grocery retailers on the call today, as well as service station owners. There's a huge opportunity for partnerships there, a model to create that groceries into your boot model that who knows what we're going to need in the future in the UK and across the rest of the globe outside of China. Who knows what our shopping behavior is going to be like. I know Kevin will try and add some more flesh onto the bones of that one as we go on. So now we're moving on to the second part of today's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin and Adam, who are going to share with us some insight from their specific areas of responsibility. So Adam, I would like to start with a question to you, please, sir. Today, we have heard many examples of how businesses have responded to the COVID-19 scenario. How are the consumers feeling amongst all of this uncertainty? Please could you share with us how customer sentiment is in China right now, and what trends predictions are coming out of the data and behaviours we have seen?
Sure. First of all, thanks to Matt and to ThoughtWorks for having me along today. It's really great to be sitting alongside such a panel of experts. And Rugia, that was some excellent case studies there. I think the examples that you gave and this kind of uptick in e-commerce and social media traffic is a sure sign that consumer confidence is returning in China. And this is backed up by a few surveys that have been carried out over the last few weeks. There was one at the peak of the coronavirus crisis in China, which interviewed 250 Chinese millionaires, high net worth individuals, of which the vast majority, kind of 86% or so, expressed a high degree of confidence that the Chinese economy was bouncing back. McKinsey have been publishing regular updates to their consumer sentiment surveys on a week-by-week basis. The most recent edition showed that over half, 56% now, of Chinese respondents expressed confidence that China's economy was not only going to bounce back within 2 to 3 months, but it was actually going to be in a much better position than it was at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis. And that number up from just 43% a few weeks ago. So again, we see this confidence returning day by day. But one of the interesting things I think that we're seeing at the moment is that while the economy as a whole is getting back on track, there are inequalities, there are disparities in which areas, which geographies, which demographics have been kind of recovering quicker than others. The first and most interesting one, I think, is if you look at the kind of geographic spread of this bounce back. Now, there was this survey done by a Chinese bank, China Renaissance, of 1,000 consumers just a few weeks ago, that basically showed that shoppers in larger and wealthier cities, think Beijing, Shanghai, are actually more likely these days to focus on saving, whereas those from the kind of, I guess, kind of more developing regions were more likely to actually spend their money. Similarly, people aged between 18 and 35, so that kind of mainstay, that engine of consumer growth in China over the last few years, were again more likely to cut down on their spending budget, while those that were over the age of 45 and students were more likely to be spending. This shift is one that we've seen kind of developing slowly over the last few years. Indeed, over the last decade or so, the compound annual growth rate in these so-called lower tier cities outside of the big urban centers of consumption have been growing at twice the rate of their kind of more urbanized comparisons. And so it's just a couple of years ago we saw this pivot, this turning point, where lower tier cities were kind of overtaking the bigger ones in terms of retail spend, but coronavirus has really kind of increased that over time.
Interesting. Thanks, Adam. It sounds like in China there's a potential new retail persona emerging there. So clearly we're seeing some confidence returning and some available spend is in consumers' pockets. So how is that materializing in different behaviors we're seeing with digital retail?
Yeah, great question. I think, again, just as Rugia was pointing out, the kind of we've seen this kind of overall growth in digital consumer behavior and a digital consumer base over the last couple of months. Mobile internet consumption, for example, in China over Chinese New Year and during coronavirus was up 26%, which is crazy given the amount of time that Chinese consumers are already spending on mobile devices. A great example of the ways that some of the brands have been pivoting to kind of adapt to this system. Rugia gave some really great examples. Another one that I really like is a Shanghai-based cosmetics retailer, Forest Cabin, who suddenly found that they weren't able to sell in any of their physical retail stores, so they retrained and redeployed 1,600 employees to start live streaming from home on Taobao Live and start selling the products that way. But again, just as with the kind of geographic spread that I mentioned before, there are a couple of different things I want to highlight here in terms of the disparities in this recovery. The first thing is that while kind of overall digital activity has increased, some platforms have done markedly better than others. So at Tong, the agency that I run, we manage the social media presences of dozens and dozens of foreign brands in the market. One sec, sorry. I knew that was going to happen. My battery has just died. Hi, can you hear me?
Well recovered, Adam. I can hear you.
All right, sorry about that, guys. I could hear the thing in my ear saying battery running low, and I was praying it wasn't going to die right at that moment. But there you go. So as I said, some platforms have done markedly better than others, and we as an agency have been quite privileged to kind of sit across all of this data and see how this has played out. And some of the more established platforms like WeChat, Weibo, have fared less well than some of the more upstart social media and e-commerce platforms, the likes of Douyin and Kuaishou, Red, that was mentioned by Rujia, Pinduoduo, the e-commerce platform. These are smaller by comparison. I mean, we're still talking hundreds of millions of users. But during the coronavirus crisis, they've really managed to kind of up their game and steal a bit of a march on the competition, catapulting them more into the kind of public domain. The crisis has also created this whole new class of social media influencers that we just haven't seen before. And working with these handheld celebrities has been a kind of cornerstone of any digital retail strategy in China for years now. But knowing how to repurpose and reskin your digital strategy for China, taking into account these newer platforms and these newer influencers is going to be key for brands as they look to the months and years ahead. Second very, very quick thing I just wanted to touch on was that, again, just as with geographies, just as with digital platforms, there's been an imbalance in different product categories and how they've recovered in the market as well. So survey results have shown that while consumers are cutting back spending in certain areas, jewelry, handbags, kind of high ticket fashion items, what we're seeing is a kind of almost like a bit of a democratization of of foreign spending. So rather than consumers looking for those one-off purchases of high value luxury foreign items, they're looking to bring in kind of everyday luxuries into their life. So things like foreign made yoga mats or kitchen utensils or pajamas. And so brands that have kind of been able to pivot and drive growth in those categories are starting to do really well.
Brilliant. Fantastic insight, Adam. Thank you for sharing the viewpoint from the customer mindset. So we've discussed retail innovations from Ruja, and we've heard about the customer insights from Adam just then. But now I would like us to start thinking about the actionable strategy that the rest of the globe can start to implement. What learnings should we be actioning straight away? So Kevin Flynn is ThoughtWorks retail strategist. So Kevin, please could you give us your thoughts on what retailers should be adjusting to address right now?
Of course, thanks, Matt. Well, it goes without saying the clear immediate priority for businesses has been the safety of people and consumers. And as such, this initial acceleration of the COVID crisis and lockdown has been a shock to the system. But now it would appear that we're starting to see the situation stabilise. Yeah. So, and broadly speaking, businesses are facing two different types of challenge. So on one hand, we have retailers of non-discretionary goods like grocery, and they've been faced with surging demand across all channels. And that coupled with a dramatic shift toward e-commerce. And actually looking at that, it's been interesting to see how the traditional incumbents, the multi-channel supermarkets like Sainsbury's and Tesco, have coped versus the kind of the tech darling Ocado. And perhaps illustrating that having a physical store network is actually can actually make you more resilient in this particular day and age. So then we have retailers of discretionary goods such as fashion products, and I think here we've obviously seen overall market demand drop off as stores close, but we have seen this shift towards e-commerce channels as they provide the only opportunity to trade. And this is where I think we see some kind of glimmers of optimism. So recent market data from people like McKinsey and Emarsys is showing that in the first half of April, there's been an 80% increase year on year in online e-commerce traffic. And that's not just restricted to grocery categories, that includes categories like fashion. And that's across Europe and the US, and clear evidence that you have not just consumers focusing on digital channels, but also business is starting to make that shift as well. And then, so when we talk with our clients, obviously meeting this shift, it is a challenge, and there's a number of measures that we see people starting to put in place, and I can just highlight maybe a few of those. The first is a revision of existing buying and merchandising plans in light of the new market context. As we touched on before, it's your business needing to adapt. So we're seeing people redeploy their teams and shift the organisation toward the categories that are in most demand. So categories which involve people having living more comfortable lives in their homes, and obviously the essential categories. And then obviously there's this shift toward e-commerce across the board. Looking across into the organization itself and the kind of surrounding ecosystem, we have retailers and organizations working very hard to collaborate with their suppliers and work to optimize things like product mix, volume, payment terms, etc. And then maybe last but probably the most important is really careful management of cash flow. At the moment, I think we're already reading the headlines. There's a number of businesses out there who are struggling, and those that are surviving are keeping a very close eye on cash at the minute.
Even more reason to be getting revenue coming through the door, yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin. There's actually lots for us to be working on right now, clearly. So thinking a little further afield, what should we be thinking about for the near medium term future and when normality, dare I use that word, starts to return?
I think initially I'd say organisations need to continue investing in digitising their commercial infrastructure to increase speed and efficiency across the areas that I've just mentioned. I think longer term, we're all in agreement that COVID-19 is going to leave a lasting change upon the consumer environment. And while that change can be daunting, at the same time, it also means an opportunity for organisations that are set up to innovate at pace and scale. And within that, as a critical enabler, technology capability is just going to get more and more important. I think from a consumer point of view, as we emerge from the crisis, we're going to see a particularly safety and health conscious consumer. So as an example, we'll see a far greater emphasis on contactless technologies and apps which let you to serve yourself and check out on your own device, as an example. I'm already starting to hear about the plans of people like McDonald's and Starbucks in that area. I think longer term, the trend towards digital and propositions that really provide consumers with what they want, whenever and when they want it, that is going to continue to evolve. And in turn, organisations themselves are going to need to be bold and rethink how they meet the needs of their customers. And this kind of brings me to one of my favourite kind of Chinese examples where someone's done this. So Alibaba have something they call the Hamer Store, which is their flagship. It's a flagship concept, and it sits within their new retail experience where they look to fuse online and offline. So here, the Hamer have reimagined the store by combining a physical retail store, food service and restaurant area, and also a micro distribution centre, which has bikes delivering to the locality. And they've created a multimodal format which enables consumers' needs to be met in a number of different ways throughout the day. So for example, you can go and shop in store, or you can eat in the store. You can have groceries delivered to your home or workplace, or alternatively, you can have cooked food delivered to your home or workplace. And then just as I talk through that model, I think it gives you an idea of just how adaptive it is. And I don't think you'd be surprised to hear that the Hamer model has readily adapted to the crisis. And in turn, Alibaba's announced plans to open 200 further stores this year. But that's China. I think looking close to home, continuing the theme, recent headlines also show Amazon are intending to extend their foray into the grocery sector. And then later this year, they're going to launch a new rapid grocery delivery service within the UK. So that's very much from a consumer-facing perspective. I think looking back from a business point of view, partnerships across the ecosystem are going to continue to be more important. A great example of this is the way that the restaurant players, people like Uber Eats, people like Deliveroo, have been partnering with grocers, so people like Carrefour, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, and interestingly, the petrol station forecourt operators, so people like BP and Shell. And they broaden their offering from restaurant food to include grocery. And I think this is a trend that will continue post-crisis. Actually, interestingly, when you start to think about partnership, and I touched on Ocado and M&S before, there's been lots to talk about how M&S stand to gain from the Ocado partnership. So this shift toward digital, being traded their products online. I think now it's been made very clear that the benefits that Ocado stand to get as a result of the partnership, and clearly enabling click and collect, taking the pressure off home delivery, will make Ocado a more resilient business going forward. I'm conscious I've spoken a lot about food. I guess from a non-food perspective, partnerships are also going to continue to be key. And Adam Rouge done a great job of talking through the opportunity that exists within the working with digital and marketplace platforms both in market and then also using them to realise opportunities by trading across borders. I think from a ThoughtWorks point of view, we've worked with a number of clients, helping them build the critical operational and technological infrastructure that you need to partner, and the work is required in order to be effective in that area. And then we're anticipating an increase in investment in that area over coming months.
Brilliant. Really good. Thank you, Kevin. There's definitely some golden nuggets for people to consider in there and begin actioning straight away. I think it's clear there is simply no reason for any of us, retailers, whatever industry we're in, to be standing still right now. Whether it's a partnership model, whether it's a business model innovation, whether it's a simple stream on your mobile phone, whatever it is, there is opportunity for revenue. People are still spending, the market is still moving. So find that way, have that ideation session, find your opportunity. Well, that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. And now I'd like to start addressing some of the brilliant questions that you've all been submitting. Thank you very much for that. Keep them coming as we go through this discussion. If you haven't already submitted them, you know where it is, the little Q&A button at the bottom, and I'll try and fit as many as I can in the time we have remaining. So now panelists, now you really earn your money today. So you're going off cuff. Okay, so we had a question up first. Do you have any tips for Western companies that want to create live stream shopping events in China? Which platforms would be best and easy to integrate with? So Ruja or Adam, I don't know who would be best to answer this. Maybe you could have a joint effort.
Adam, do you want to go first?
Oh, I was going to say the same thing. If you don't mind, well, we've been having this very same conversation actually with quite a few brands at the moment as they look to think about how they can pivot their business towards China. Obviously, retail sales here have kind of dried up, and China offers a plethora of opportunities for brands that really want to take advantage of them. So live streaming is a great way to do that, and Ruja gave some classic examples of that done well, Louis Vuitton being one of them. The thing about live streaming is that the thing that we try and get into brands' heads when it comes to live streaming is that I think we tend to think of live streaming as being all about content and all about kind of technology. You've got to have a camera set up, you've got to make it look good, you've got to think about those kinds of considerations, whereas actually what live streaming really is influencer marketing. Mostly brands will not sell directly through their own, or not broadcast directly through their own brand channels of live streaming, but rather use local influencers to kind of sell on their behalf. Now, of course, from the kind of back end perspective, you need to be able to kind of fulfill those orders and be able to take payment and what have you. And there are some platforms that are easier to set up on others. Red, that we talked about, is a relatively easy one. Setting up a WeChat mini program could be another way of doing it. But crucially, like I said, the most important thing to consider is actually kind of getting in front of these audiences in the first place. And for that, you're looking at influencer marketing, which unfortunately is not the easiest thing to get right. And there are, for every one example of 15,000 lipsticks sold in 5 minutes, which is I think still the record. There are hundreds of examples of brands that have kind of done that wrong. Always work with an expert influencer, somebody that is kind of knows their stuff in that particular industry. Don't necessarily just go for vanity metrics. Oh, I got 1 million viewers on my last channel. Look for those that can convert. Do your homework, do your due diligence. These are all just the kind of basic building blocks that every brand should be thinking about when doing any form of influencer marketing. I think especially live streaming in China. There are multiple platforms out there. Major ones for foreign brands to be aware of would be Douyin, or TikTok as it's known in English. Kuaishou, which I mentioned briefly before, which caters more to a kind of rural audience. Platforms like Bilibili, which tend to be a kind of younger audience. Yijibo, which is owned by Weibo, another social media platform, which is kind of offers some kind of interesting integrations with the rest of social media. So unfortunately, no quick fixes. Lots of different options. It really depends on the product type and what kind of influencers are open to you.
Ruja, can I just get you to bring that to life? Ruja shared a stat with me yesterday, which absolutely blew my brains, around one of the results from one of the Shoppertainment live streams. Could you share that, Ruja?
Yeah, so I for one of the shopping centers in Beijing, actually. I think it's Joy City. They did live stream in the store, and they were doing live streaming from Estee Lauder. And one of the salesperson said that they actually made more sales in 3 hours compared to 1 week offline. So they were able to get all of that in just 3 hours of live stream. So phenomenal results. And I think it's, and there's a couple of different formats. Like Adam mentioned a lot of the social channels, and I think there are also other formats where I've seen, you know, for a more, say, luxury experience, there is also just like one-to-one social selling as well, which is happening a lot with the store associates. So how can we help the sales consultant to do that while the customers can't come into the store? So it's been quite normal behavior in China for sales consultants to be staying in touch with their luxury customers over WeChat. And so during this period of time, you know, how can they continue to do just video calls in the store, and then just making sure that as a brand, we're equipping them with the ability to do that transaction in a safe way. So previously, if these were happening over WeChat, just sending each other money, how can we set up a really quick payment page for the customer to actually make that official payment, and then for the sales consultant to make sure that that commission is still attached to their name to give them that sufficient incentive. And then to add on to what Adam was saying as well, I think apart from the content itself, choosing that right influencer, but also making sure that we do actually get the data on the customer. So that if we are using a third-party platform, just making sure that we are collecting that information, that we can retarget them at a later time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ruja and Adam, and thank you to the question submitted. So next up, the question is, how do you think these innovations will do after COVID-19? Won't people still want to touch and feel cars and houses, for example? It's a brilliant question, and it's in my own current role, I talk to a lot of clients about this. What does the future of innovation look like? I think it's hard for me to judge. I'm a 41-year-old male, and my experience of what I want to do, how I want to do my shopping is very different to my wife's. It's very different to the 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old people I work with alongside at ThoughtWorks as well. All I can say about this is immediately I'm seeing a change in world. I'm seeing a change in behavior from the entire community around where I live. I'm seeing the traditional pub that's next door to my house that would always do luxury food, great food, but on an evening, it didn't have the attendance from the families in the village because they on an evening were unable to take the kids to their food. They've started doing takeaway evenings twice a week, and they're sold out 3 weeks ahead already of what they can capacity. I know that this is going to change their business model forever. When they come back out of COVID, yes, of course, they're going to want to fill every table in the pub, but there's an opportunity. I talked earlier about thinking big, opportunity for growth. Maybe extra kitchen staff, maybe an add-on on the side of the place to be able to do that takeaway and in-house option. We've seen it throughout London, the restaurants, the delivery model, how they've pivoted to in-store and takeaway now. But I think that's going to grow across the country. And we talk about touch and feel cars and houses. Yeah, this, again, it blows my mind, but this is a trend that has been growing and has been emphasized by COVID-19, but was already around just before. We work with a lot of automobile companies in Asia and across in Europe, and we're seeing this trend. We're seeing people buy £150,000 cars without touching and feeling it, designing it completely online, and that is what they want to do right now. It is a change of mindset for all of us, but this could be the future of retail.
Matt, if I could just build on that.
Of course.
I think we've been on this kind of there's this kind of path, this evolution, and offline and online experiences have been to a large extent fairly separate. And I think now what we're seeing very clearly is that these things are going to start to be brought together, and they're going to be much more integrated going forward. Like we talk about the Hamer concept, but I think being able to shop on a device in a store and check out in store. Now, these were things that you could actually do in many cases before the crisis. But the crisis it's really an accelerator, and it suddenly provided a catalyst for things making much more sense and actually encouraging different types of behaviours going forward. So I think ultimately, as we start to emerge from the crisis and going forward, this fusion where whether you're in a store, whether you're at home, your online and offline experiences are going to start to occur together, and consumers, their expectations of things like customer service, for example, are going to reflect that. Yeah, so if I can have customer service and I can have it via some kind of VC, then that I think that these kind of things will just be expectations that's exactly what companies provide to consumers going forward.
Excellent, thank you. I know we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to skip some. I'm a bit biased. I know some have been submitted by ThoughtWorks, so I'll pick up with them offline. Next question from Tim Gittint. Can you give some feedback on the main challenges you faced in the retail and hospitality sectors with regards to maintaining social distancing when customers came back following lockdown? I think there's only one of us on this call that could answer that. Ruja, what have you seen?
Yeah. So I think contactless services will be around for a long time as activity resumes, and people are still feeling a little bit worried about, asymptomatic cases, etc. So what's happening is there's a lot of contactless services where you just scan a QR code. Even if you're at the shop already, there's a code to order. So you scan the code, you put in your order online, and then when it's ready, they actually put it on a location just outside the restaurant, and you pick it up and go. At the same time, to alleviate some of these worries, there is end-to-end tracking of people's temperatures. So when I put in a delivery order, I can actually see who prepared my food, and say in the app that we have to track deliveries, there's a little temperature bar floating above their head, and it has that there, 36.3 degrees. So I can feel safe about this. Restaurants are also doing a lot of things like posting their cleaning and disinfection logs online. So on the food platforms in China right now, they made a special section, which is just showing a log of every time that they disinfected the place, they checked the temperatures of everyone in the restaurant. So I think people will still continue to be worried, but there's a lot of contactless technology and just keeping that transparency about what's happening in the store.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruja. Next question is from Celia. Do you have any insights on whether consumers outside China have the same positive outlook on how quickly their economies will bounce back? Kevin or Adam, any ideas on this one?
I think we've touched on some stats during the panel discussion, which shows that from an online point of view, we're seeing dramatic growth year on year. Outside that, I think it's very early. It's very early to say, to be honest. I think we're really in the grip of the peak of the crisis at the moment. Adam, I don't know whether you'd have anything.
I'm not sure. There are almost certainly been some comparative studies out there. My gut instinct is that Chinese kind of sentiment is a lot more positive than in other countries. I think that the Chinese bounce back will almost certainly be a lot stronger than in many other countries, and that's partly structural. It's just kind of an acceleration of some of these trends that we've been seeing over time anyway. China was already a much more digitized economy in many respects, not in all respects, but in many respects than here, for example, and so has been quite quick to adapt to the current situations, and some of the examples Ruja just gave of the measures that these companies are taking now, once the economy is kind of in the process of recovering, I think just demonstrate that. Like I said, I think for many brands now that are facing up to the harsh reality of the retail climate here and in the US, countries like China and South Korea are offering kind of opportunities that they're just not going to see at home. And so understanding how you can kind of pivot in as kind of quick and lean way as possible, I think is going to be really key to global retail strategies.
Thank you. Okay, next question we have up is, which of these innovations that we're seeing in China do you think could be relevant for Europe / UK? Well, I can answer that immediately. Every single one of them, every single one of the stories that Ruja shared, we will start to see the changing in our behaviors. I truly believe that. Some of them are already in existence, but the shoppertainment thing, I think, will absolutely become a real thing in the UK. In fact, I was surprised to hear my wife say that a local independent fashion store does this on Facebook Live, just with her own mobile, just with her own following, but goes around the new arrivals in the store once a fortnight. I wonder why all the parcels were arriving at my door. But yeah, I think that will become a huge thing, a huge ability. Teleshopping, it's like teleshopping, but on enhanced exponentially. The ability for you to talk to that person and say, can you go a bit closer on that item? Can you turn it around? How would you recommend something to go with that item of clothing? And this extends into anything. Kevin mentioned a bicycle company doing almost like a bicycle fashion show, online streaming during the day, during this lockdown period, a company based in Yorkshire. And your ability to ask that questions about the bike that you've always wanted to the sales agent without making the trip to the store, without being disappointed with the lack of stock availability. It's that real validation and the ability to answer all the questions you want and make the purchase there and then. You talk about the buying houses, buying cars online. I mentioned it earlier, it blows my brain, but it absolutely will become the thing. Very, very recently, friends of ours were living in the north of England and had to relocate with a job. And one of the sides of the relationship was at work, and the other side went to the house for their final choice about whether they were going to do it. And he Facebook Lived as he walked around the house and described things. And they made the purchase there and then. He put the deposit on the house without his partner being present. So I absolutely think all of these could be easily adopted, even in rusty format at first, but will become the norm for what we see going forward. Okay, time for a couple more questions. So Tristan Rowcliffe has submitted, hello, given where we are in the crisis curve in the UK, will retailers only starting to adopt these new concepts of selling and engagement now be too late to the party? Or do you think that we have set a new level of expectation in terms of how consumers expect to engage with retailers long term? Kevin, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a nice lead on to the question that we've just answered. And I think you've answered it yourself, Christian. I'm pretty clear. I think we've set a new level of expectation in terms of consumers how consumers will expect to engage with retailers going forward. So it's not too late. In fact, I'd argue it's kind of the beginning. And in terms of what that beginning looks like from a retail point of view, it's really using all the tools that we have at hand in order to really effectively engage with the consumer. And it's more than just a store, and it's more than just a static website. There are all manner of tools there which enable you to build a much richer connection with the customer, as Rouge has demonstrated in many of her examples in China, and Matt and Adam have demonstrated in some of the examples that they've given. So it's the start. So the question is, for all businesses, what are you going to do about it?
Thank you. Sorry, I was talking to me. The next question, probably best for you to answer, Rouge. Has there been any learnings from the leisure sector in China as to how they're opening again?
This is probably one that's a little bit harder. So a lot of around like holidaying is affected significantly. Hotels, travel, airlines, and then people are just staying at home more and consuming more online content. So I think probably domestic travel will pick up again this year, but international travel will take a long time. And then other things like gyms, entertainment, domestically, it's all just starting back up. I think people are still a little bit worried, and there are still limitations from government on making sure there are less people in the same space. So at the moment, I haven't seen any amazing things here. I'm not sure if maybe Adam has seen some in China as well that you can add.
Within the travel sector, certainly, I was reading something yesterday about Chinese airlines and what they've been doing to try and encourage domestic travel. And the deals are absolutely ridiculous. They're just trying to get bums on seats, right? So it's, 2-for-1 offers, like group deals where you buy 10 seats, get 2 free, a ridiculous air mile offers, that kind of thing. So there's a real desire to kickstart the economy, both from the government and also from these businesses, obviously. We'll have to see whether that really takes off. And I do think that, as Rudy said, I think the leisure sector is going to be one of the ones that takes a little bit longer to recover than some of the others. But it will get back. The Chinese appetite for travel has been growing strong for over a decade now. I think from an international perspective, I think it's going to be interesting to see which countries are first to kind of get back to some kind of semblance of normality when it comes to attracting Chinese tourists. I certainly know from within the student sector, we work with a lot of universities, and there's a lot of worry, here in the UK, in the US, in Australia, which countries come off best from a kind of almost from a PR perspective in China, for these families to send their kids abroad. And I think in tourism, it's going to be the same thing. The US has plummeted off a cliff. The UK has done okay, but still not great. And there's definitely going to be a bit of an arms race, I think, off the back of all of this.
Thank you for the question.
I have one thing to add around hotels actually. So while occupancy rates are around 10%, they're probably back to 50% over this next month. But at this time, a lot of hotels are taking the opportunity to do their big renovations. So they're not losing out on lots of revenue. So they're shutting down for refurbishment at this time. And then there are others like 5-star hotels who think about what is their core advantage. It is in being able to deliver a luxury experience and how, in their supply chains, their ability to acquire these great quality products at lower price. And they've been actually pivoting their business model to actually try e-commerce and sell these luxury experiences to customers. So you can have a 5-star hotel experience at home through our supply chain. You can get these great duvets, what do we call them in the UK? Duvets, I don't know. You can get these at significantly lower prices. And also, you know, the organic eggs, etc. Just using their supply chain, their specialty, and selling to customers something that's different and creating a new revenue stream.
Thanks, Ruja. We haven't got time to answer all the questions, so I'm going to rifle through them. Somebody's asked about affiliated market-based sales. Please drop Adam an email, contact him on LinkedIn. He will absolutely be able to answer that question perfect for you. The last 2 questions from Soumya and from Michael, really, really important question. You're going to be walking back into an environment where your budgets have changed, your portfolio has changed, your entire 2020 strategy has changed. You must now use these tools. You must now truly understand, are you building the right thing and are you building it right? Really, really mature, agile, lean processes need to be applied now so that you don't waste what little money you're going to be walking back into as CIOs and across our portfolios. So use those tools. I would love to elaborate further on them, so please drop me a line or on LinkedIn. I'll be able to talk to you more about how to approach that. So a big wrap up. Thank you again to all of you for your attendance. Amazing questions, amazing speakers with brilliant insights. The slides in the recorded webinar will be shared to everybody who registered. Should any of you have any questions coming out today and wish to discuss them with me, then my details are on the screen there right now, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Lastly, feel free to access our hub page, thoughtworks.com/COVID-19, COVID-19, to find lots of links to these webinars, other webinars we're hosting at the moment, and lots of useful information right now about coping with lockdown conditions. Absolutely a huge thank you for giving you all of your time. I hope it's been useful. I'd love to have follow-up conversations with anybody. Have a great rest of the day. Stay safe, everybody, and thank you.